we're going to finish up section 6.2. We're still factoring, and we're still in two-step factoring, this two-step factoring process. My first problem here is 2x squared minus 12xy plus 16y squared. I see that these both, or all three terms, have a common factor of 2. So my greatest common factor here is actually a 2, and that's all they have in common. So if I take out a 2, that leaves me with x squared. 2 times a negative 6 would give me a negative 12 with an xy. And 2 times 8 with a y squared would give me 16y squared. My GCF is 2, so I'm going to bring that down. I see I have x squared, so that's x times x in the front. And I have y squared, so that's y times y in the back. My factors of 8 that add to give me 6 are 2 and 4. I know my signs are the same because it ends with a plus, so this tells me they're the same sign, and this tells me they're both negative. So my answer is 2 times x minus 2y times x minus 4y. In my next problem, we have 3x squared plus 21x plus 36. And they don't have any variables in common, but they do all have a 3 in common. So I'm just going to take out that 3. And that leaves me with x squared plus 7x plus 12. I'm going to bring down the 3, and then I'm going to factor what's left behind. So my choices for x squared are x times x, and my choices for 12 are 1 times 12, 2 times 6, and 3 times 4. The group that adds to give me 7 would be 3 times 4. It ends with a positive, which means your signs are the same, and your first sign tells you what they'll both be, so they'll both be positive. So you have a 3 outside, and an x plus 3, and an x plus 4 inside. My next problem is y to the 4th minus 12y cubed plus 35y squared. These do not have numbers in common, but all three terms contain a y. So I can actually take out y to the second because my smallest y is y squared. So taking that out, that leaves me with 2 y's, 2 and 2 would give me 4, minus 12 with 1 y left over, plus 35 with no y's left over. Bring down the y squared, and then we can open our parentheses for our regular trinomial. My choices for y squared are y times y, and the factors of 35 that add to give me 12 would be 7 times 5. It ends with a plus, which tells me the signs are the same, and this negative in the front tells me they'll both be negative. So your answer is y squared times y minus 7 times y minus 5. In our next problem, we have 3 and 15 and 18, so those numbers share a common factor of 3. I also notice that they all have an x. So what we have left, we took out a 3 and we took out 1x, so that leaves me with x squared minus 3 times 5 gives me 15 with 1x left over plus 6. I'm going to bring down my 3x. My choices for x squared are x times x, and you have to be extremely careful with 6. My choices for 6 are 1 and 6, and 2 and 3. I'm looking for what adds to give me 5. So if you add this first group, that gives you 7. So 1 and 6 won't work. If you add the second group, you get 5. So your choices would be 2 and 3. I'm looking for what adds to give me 5. Since it ends with a positive, that means your signs are the same. And this number in front is negative, which means they'll both be negative. Looking at the last one, we have a greatest common factor. I see that they all have a 3 in common, and I see that they all have an x in common. But I will go ahead and warn you that trinomials are extremely hard to factor when you start with a negative. So I'm going to go ahead and factor out a negative with it. So I'm taking out a negative and a 3 and an x. Okay, so I took out negative 3 and I took out one x. So that means two x's are left behind, which would be an x squared. For my next one, I took out a negative. So a negative 3 times a negative 2 would give me 6. And I have one x left over. Be careful, two negatives make a positive, so I had to put the negative in there. Looking at the last term, a negative 3 times a negative 8 would give you a positive 24. Did you have to factor out the negative? But no, you did not. But it makes the trinomial part easier. So I have a negative 3x out front. I can open my parentheses, and I would have x times x underneath. And the factors of 8 that subtract to give me 2 would be 4 and 2. Now I have a 4 and a 2, and I'm looking to get a negative 2 out of that, which means the 4 needs to be negative and the 2 positive. So my final answer is negative 3x times x minus 4 times x plus 2.